weak Omega Girl was sold to the vampire lord at midnight, but he called her his fated mate. The wind howled across the cliffs, carrying a bitter chill that seemed to seep into the bones of the city below. In the heart of a kingdom long forgotten by the sun, the market slept under the heavy veil of midnight. Lanterns flickered like dying stars along the cobblestone streets, and even the whispers of the night seemed afraid to linger too long. In a small, crumbling house on the outskirts, Lyria sat huddled on a straw-stuffed chair. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, trembling as her mind wandered to the inevitable. She was the youngest of her family, frail and quiet, always careful to avoid attention. But tonight, attention had chosen her. Her father, a man broken by debt and misfortune, had been desperate. He had sold her, not out of cruelty, but out of fear that the kingdom's collectors would take everything he had left. Now she would be delivered into the hands of the most feared figure the kingdom had ever known, Lord Kale, the vampire lord of the northern cliffs. The thought made her stomach twist. She had heard stories whispered in the market, tales of a man with eyes like black ice, whose presence could drain warmth from the world itself. Yet in her heart there was a strange curiosity, like the faint glimmer of a candle in a long abandoned hall. A carriage waited at the edge of the forest, its black wheels crunching softly on the frosted stones. 2 men in hooded cloaks ushered her inside, the door closing with a whisper that seemed to swallow the moonlight. She peered through the small window, watching her home shrink into the darkness. As the carriage moved along the cliffs, Lyria tried to steady her breathing. She had never seen the sea at night before, but now the waves crashed against jagged rocks far below, white foam glowing under the pale moon. The wind carried with it a scent she could not name, metallic, cold, and alive. It seemed to whisper her name. When the carriage arrived, the castle loomed above her like a giant carved from shadow. Its towers reached high into the sky, clawing at the stars as if they could tear them down. The gate opened silently, and Lyria stepped onto stone that seemed to hum beneath her feet. She was brought into a great hall, where candles burned in silver sconces. Shadows danced along the walls like restless spirits. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved of obsidian and bone, was Kael. He rose slowly, tall and unnervingly still, his presence filling every corner of the hall. His eyes met hers, and for the briefest moment, she felt as if the world had stopped. There was no cruelty in his gaze, no warmth either, just a calm, absolute attention that made her skin prickle. "You are Lyria," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and impossibly cold. "I hear you have been offered to me." Lyria swallowed hard, unable to speak. Her lips were dry, her heart hammering like a drum. Kael stepped forward, each movement deliberate, as though he measured not just the distance but the very air between them. "Do you understand what it means to be in my presence?" he asked, his dark eyes scanning her as if he could see every hidden fear, every secret thought. She nodded, barely. I think so, my lord." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled, a small, almost human gesture that seemed strange and foreign on his pale face. "And yet, I do not see the fear I expected." His gaze softened, though it did not lose its intensity.
"You are not merely a gift, Lyria?"
"You are rare, fated."
The word echoed in the hall, heavy and strange. Lyria did not understand.
She only knew that every instinct in her told her to step back, to flee, but her feet would not obey. Kael continued, as if reading her hesitation. "You have been brought to me not by accident. There is a bond between us, one older than the kingdom, older than the stones of this castle." Her heart skipped. The stories had spoken of fated mates, of powerful connections that bound life and death. And yet, she was weak. She had never done anything remarkable. She was a girl who often went unnoticed, yet this man claimed a bond that could not be broken. "Why me?" she whispered. Kael's eyes softened further, because even the weakest flame can ignite the strongest fire. A shiver ran down her spine. She wanted to ask more, but the sound of footsteps interrupted them. A man in dark velvet approached, bowing slightly to Cale. "My lord, there are visitors," he said. "One claims a right to the girl. He comes in the name of the Northern Court." Cale's expression hardened, and the warmth of the previous moments vanished. "Bring him here," he commanded. The doors opened, revealing a figure cloaked in white, his face hidden beneath a hood. He carried himself with arrogance, and though he did not speak, Lyria felt the tension in the room shift. "This girl belongs to me," Cale declared, his voice low and dangerous. "She is mine by fate, by law, and by blood." The visitor laughed softly, but it did not reach his eyes. "Fate is a tale told by those too weak to claim their own power," he said. "I will see if the girl's value is greater than the promise of your legend." Cale's hand moved slightly, and the room seemed to grow colder. Shadows shifted along the walls as though alive. Lyria's breath caught in her throat. There was a power here she could feel, not just in Cale, but in the air itself. Before she could think, the visitor advanced. Cale's presence expanded, a wave of force that seemed to push back the very shadows. Lyria's knees went weak, but she did not fall. Something stirred within her, a pulse, faint and trembling, as if her body recognized the danger and yet responded to it. Cale's gaze snapped to it, sharp and commanding. "Do you feel it?" he asked. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Good," he said almost tenderly. "Fear will guide you, but your heart will choose." The visitor stepped closer, and Cale moved like a shadow, cutting the space between them with an ease that was almost fluid. He placed himself between the intruder and Lyria. "You do not touch her," Cale said, his voice cold, like steel on stone. The visitor laughed again, but this time it was hollow. "Then you will see how strong fate truly is," he said. Before either could act, Lyria felt something stir in her chest. A warmth, faint but undeniable, spreading from her heart to her fingertips. The candle flames flickered, shadows wavered, and for a moment the room seemed suspended in silence. Cale's eyes widened slightly. He had felt it too. A pulse of power, a hidden spark within her. It was not much, but it was enough to change the course of the night. "You," he breathed, almost to himself. Then, turning fully to the intruder, his voice became a thunderous command. "Leave this place, or I will show you what it means to challenge me." The visitor hesitated, then slowly backed away, retreating into the shadows. The doors closed behind him, and the tension in the hall thinned, though the air remained heavy with unspoken words. Cale finally turned to Lyria. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something new: interest, awe, perhaps even care. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. I think so," she said, trembling. "I am yours?" He stepped closer, and for the first time, she saw him not as a monster, not as a lord of darkness, but as a man, complex, powerful, and yet bound by forces even he could not fully control. "Yes," he said. "You are mine, fated and rare. But do not think this means you are powerless. The bond is not just mine to command, it is ours. Together, we will see how far it can reach. Fear, confusion, and something warmer, something like hope, mixed in her chest. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to demand answers, but her voice failed her. Instead, she only nodded, letting the truth of her fate settle over her, like a heavy cloak. Goyle's smile returned, faint and shadowed. "Sleep now," he said. "Tomorrow you will begin to learn what it means to be bound by fate and to survive the darkness that follows it." she was led to a chamber unlike any she had ever seen. High ceilings, walls lined with dark tapestries, and windows that looked out over the cliffs and the endless sea. She lay on a bed of soft velvet, but her mind would not rest. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a whisper, and yet, in the midst of fear, one thought refused to leave her. I am his fated mate, and somehow I will survive. Somewhere in the castle, Kale watched from a tower. The moonlight cast silver across his pale face. For centuries he had known no equal, no companion, and yet tonight he had found something. Fragile, trembling, but undeniably strong. And the night was only beginning. The morning sun struggled to break through thick clouds over the northern cliffs. Inside the castle, shadows lingered, reluctant to yield to daylight. Lyria woke in her chamber. The velvet sheets still warm from the night, but her heart raced with unease. She could not shake the memory of Kale's piercing gaze or the strange power she had felt stir within her chest. She rose slowly, stepping barefoot across the cold stone floor. Every corner of the room seemed to whisper secrets she could not yet understand. The air smelled faintly of old wood and candle smoke, but beneath it she sensed a pulse, something alive, watching, waiting. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find a servant, a quiet woman named Muriel, who had tended to the castle for decades. Her eyes were kind but wary.
"Good morning, Lady Lyria," Muriel said gently.
"The Lord requests your presence." Lyria swallowed hard, her palms clammy. I will go," she whispered. As she walked through the hallways, the castle felt alive, almost sentient. The portraits of long-dead lords seemed to follow her with watchful eyes, and the staircases creaked as if sighing under her presence. Every step toward Kale's private chambers made her pulse faster. She had been afraid of him last night, but now curiosity battled fear. When she entered the chamber, Kale was waiting, seated on the edge of a high-backed chair. The candlelight reflected in his eyes, making them shimmer like black diamonds.
He did not rise immediately.
Instead, he studied her with that same unnerving intensity.
"You slept well?" he asked, his voice calm yet commanding.
I think so, Lyria replied cautiously. The room, it feels alive.
It is. This castle listens, watches, and protects. But more importantly, it will test you. If you are to survive here, you must learn to feel it, not fear it. She nodded, unsure whether she understood him. Her instincts screamed caution, yet a small spark of trust had begun to grow. She had seen glimpses of something beyond his cold exterior, something that felt almost human. Kael stood suddenly and moved toward a heavy wooden table. He lifted a folded parchment and spread it across the surface. Strange symbols and drawings covered it, lines that twisted like snakes, circles enclosing mysterious runes, and markings that glowed faintly in the candlelight.
"This," Kale said, "is the map of your bloodline's power."
The prophecy that touches you and me. I cannot fully explain it yet, but your blood is rare, Lyria. It carries a spark that the world has not seen in centuries. Lyria stared at the markings, feeling both awe and terror.
I don't understand, she admitted. I am just...
Me. I'm weak. Kale's gaze softened for a moment, almost imperceptibly. Weakness is a matter of perception. You think yourself small, fragile, unnoticed. But fate does not choose the strongest. It chooses the rarest. You carry something the world cannot replace, and that is why you are mine.
Her heart fluttered at the words, a strange warmth spreading across her chest.
Jigen! She wanted to believe him, yet fear gnawed at her like a cold wind. Before she could respond, the door banged open. A tall figure entered, his presence sharp and commanding. It was the visitor from the previous night, the rival who claimed a right to her. Kale's expression darkened instantly, his power radiating outward like an invisible storm. "You are persistent," he said, his voice low, dangerous. The rival bowed mockingly. "And you are predictable, Kale." "You claim her, but how long can you hold her? How long before she realizes her power and chooses another path?" Lyria's pulse quickened. She had felt the faint stirrings of something inside her last night, a small flame of power she did not understand. And now, faced with this stranger, that power seemed to respond. Thrumming through her veins like a heartbeat, Kale moved closer, placing himself protectively between her and the intruder. "Do not test me," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. "She is not yours, and she will never be yours." The visitor laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "We shall see. Fate is fickle, and blood is unpredictable. Perhaps the girl will teach you humility, Lord of Shadows." Lyria felt the pulse in her chest surge, stronger than before. Her heart raced, and a strange heat filled her fingertips. She did not know how or why, but instinctively she raised her hands, and a faint glow rippled outward, flickering across the room. Kale froze. The glow was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. He had sensed it before, in the castle, in her blood. But seeing it manifest so clearly, it shocked him. His centuries of control had never prepared him for this.
"You," he whispered, stepping closer. "Do you feel it?" "I
think so," Lyria said, voice trembling. "Something inside me. I don't understand." Kale's eyes softened, but only slightly. "You are awakening," he said. "This is the first sign of your power. It is faint now, but it will grow. And with it, the bond between us strengthens." The rival took a cautious step back, sensing the shift. "You overestimate yourselves," he said, though his voice carried a trace of unease. "The world will not wait for your awakening." Kyle's gaze sharpened. "Neither will I." The rival retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, leaving only the echo of his mocking laugh. Lyria sank to her knees, exhausted by the surge of power that had poured through her. Kale knelt beside her, his presence both commanding and protective.
"Do not fear it," he said gently. "Your power is part of you, but it is also part of me.
Together, we are stronger than you can imagine." Lyria looked up at him, the fear and awe in her eyes mirrored in his expression. "I want to understand," she whispered.
You will," Kale said, helping her to her feet. "But understanding comes with patience and guidance."
"And you must trust me, not only with your life, but with your heart." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Lyria's heart thumped rapidly. She wanted to trust him, yet fear still held her tight. Still, beneath it all, a small spark of longing flickered, something she had never felt before. Over the next days, Kale introduced her to the castle's mysteries. She wandered through libraries filled with ancient tomes, studied maps of lands she had never known existed, and learned the rhythms of the castle that seemed alive, breathing, and aware. She began to notice subtle changes in Kale as well. The stoic, commanding lord sometimes smiled when she grasped a concept quickly, or spoke with patience when she faltered. He was still terrifying, still overwhelming in presence, but there were glimpses of someone capable of care, of fascination even, affection. One evening, as the sky darkened with a storm, Kale took her to the highest tower, where the wind tore through her hair and the sea crashed below. He pointed to the horizon, where lightning illuminated the waves in fleeting brilliance.
"Do you see, Lyria?" he asked. "The world is vast, dangerous, and beautiful.
And you are a part of it now. But danger follows you. Power calls to you. And there are those who would take it from you, or use it against you. She shivered, both from the wind and the weight of his words.
I don't know if I am ready, she admitted. Cale turned to her, his gaze intense.
Readiness is a luxury. Survival is not.
And love, fated or not, is never gentle. It tests you, pushes you, and sometimes breaks you before it strengthens you.
That is what we face. Lyria looked up at him, her heart pounding.
I want to be strong,
she whispered.
You already are, Cale said softly.
Strong in ways you do not yet see. As the storm raged outside, Lyria felt the pulse within her grow. Faint but insistent, she sensed that the power she had begun to feel was not just her own. It was tied to Cale, to the castle, to the fate that had brought them together. And though fear lingered, a strange thrill stirred within her, a mixture of longing, excitement, and dread. That night she could not sleep. Shadows seemed to move in corners, and whispers drifted along the walls. But this time, she did not feel entirely alone. Somewhere in the castle, Cale watched over her, his presence like a shield against the dark. And for the first time, Lyria wondered, perhaps fate had not chosen her merely for survival, but for something greater, something that neither of them yet fully understood. The storm had passed, leaving the cliffs washed in cold silver light. The castle, still humming with hidden life, seemed quieter than usual, as if it were holding its breath. Lyria wandered the hallways, her thoughts tangled with fear, curiosity, and a strange longing she could not name. Since the glow of her power had surged the night before, she felt different, stronger, alive in ways she had never known. But with that strength came unease, whispers in the hallways, fleeting shadows, and Cale's constant watch made her feel both protected and trapped. Cale entered her chamber without warning, his presence filling the room like the first cold breath of winter. He did not speak immediately. He only watched her, the candlelight reflecting in eyes as dark as the night. "You are restless," he observed. I feel something stirring inside me, stronger than last night. Cale stepped closer, his long coat brushing the floor. Good. That is the first step toward understanding. Power must be recognized before it can be controlled. She frowned, anxiety tightening her chest. But what if I cannot control it? Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, almost sad. Then you will learn the hard way.
Fear is not your enemy, Lyria. It is a guide.
And I will not let it consume you alone. There was something in them. Care, promise, and an unspoken intensity that made her pulse quicken. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that fate had placed her in capable hands, yet the shadows of doubt whispered relentlessly. That evening, Cale led her to the northern wing of the castle, a part rarely visited by anyone. The halls were lined with mirrors that reflected not only her image, but faint echoes of movement, as if the glass could see into her soul. "You must learn to read the signs," Cale said, guiding her to a large chamber filled with flickering orbs of light. "This is where your power will awaken fully. But it is not just magic. It is part of you, part of your bond with me, part of your destiny." She had always been small, unnoticed, weak by her own estimation. But Cale's words, and the pulse she felt within herself, told a different story. Her power was growing, and with it, her sense of purpose. As she concentrated, a soft hum filled the room, the orbs responding to her presence. Light swirled around her, brushing against her skin, warm and alive. Cale watched silently, his expression unreadable, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze on her. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the chamber. Lyria froze, and the light around her wavered. Cale moved swiftly, placing himself between her and the door. A figure stepped inside, someone unexpected. A messenger from a distant kingdom, cloaked in silk and bearing an urgent warning. "Lord Cale," the messenger said, bowing.
"The rival who claimed a right to the girl gathers forces. He marches toward the cliffs."
He intends to take her and the castle. Darkened, the calm he usually wore vanishing like mist.
How many? He demanded. "Hundreds," the messenger replied.
He is not alone. Creatures from the northern wilds follow him. The thought of being targeted again, now with her powers growing but untrained, made her shiver. She looked at Cale, expecting fear or rage, but found only a controlled, dangerous intensity.
"You will stay close to me,"
Cale said, placing a hand on her shoulder.
"No one touches you."
No one challenges what is fated. Not now, not ever. Her pulse raced, not from fear, but from the closeness of him, the warmth in the shadowed hand that rested lightly on her. A strange longing stirred in her chest, something dangerous and beautiful all at once. The next day, the castle prepared for the impending threat. Lyria trained under Cale's guidance, learning to channel her energy, to feel the bond that tied her to him. She could sense his presence everywhere, a heartbeat in the halls, a shadow in every corner. With every pulse of her power, their connection strengthened, an invisible thread linking their souls. But as she grew stronger, so did the tension. Cale's methods were strict, demanding, and sometimes frightening. He pushed her beyond her limits, forcing her to confront fear, frustration, and doubt. And yet, every time she faltered, he did not scold her. Instead, he guided, corrected, and sometimes simply stood beside her, silent but unwavering. Days passed, and Lyria realized something unexpected. She was beginning to care for him, not just as a protector, but as someone she could admire, perhaps even trust. And the thought terrified her as much as it thrilled her. She had been weak, sold, and controlled for so long. Now she was awakening to power, destiny, and feelings she could not name. The rivals' forces drew closer. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in streaks of purple and gold, Cale called her to the outer battlements. "Tonight," he said, "we will test your control. You must be ready for anything. The enemy will strike, and your strength will be tested." Lyria nodded, determination hardening her features. She had come far. Though fear still whispered in her ears, she trusted Cale. Though part of her knew that trust was fragile, easily broken. The first attack came at midnight. Shadows moved across the cliffs below, figures emerging from the darkness like whispers of death. Cale's eyes narrowed, and he extended a hand toward Lyria. "Now!" he commanded. A surge of power filled her chest, stronger than anything she had felt before. Light shimmered from her fingertips, spreading in a protective wave across the battlements. The attackers faltered, retreating from the unexpected glow. Lyria felt exhilarated, powerful, yet terrified. Cale's gaze met hers, filled with a mixture of pride and something more, an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Good," he said softly. "You are stronger than you realize." But before they could celebrate, a shadow detached itself from the enemy lines, a figure familiar and unwelcome. The rival had come forward, moving with a grace that was almost predatory. He held a blade, but more importantly, he held a challenge in his eyes. A challenge not just to Cale, but to Lyria herself. "You think this is your fight?" the rival called, his voice echoing across the cliffs. "She belongs to fate."
"Not to you." Cale stepped forward, his presence massive, commanding.
"She belongs to me," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the stones beneath their feet. The rival laughed, a sound that carried menace and amusement. "We shall see." Suddenly, Lyria felt the pulse inside her chest surge again, stronger than before. The bond with Kale responded, resonating with her energy. She did not know what to do, but instinct guided her. A wave of light, bright and fierce, shot from her hands, forming a protective barrier around Kale and herself. The attackers faltered, and the rival took a step back, eyes widening in surprise. Kale's expression softened slightly as he watched her.
You did well,
He said quietly, though his eyes remained fixed on the enemy. Your power is real. Your bond is stronger than you know. Lyria's chest heaved. She had saved them. Not entirely, but enough to make a difference. And in that moment, she understood something fundamental. She was no longer the weak girl sold into darkness. She was awakening, and with Kale beside her, she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. But the victory was short-lived. The rival retreated into the shadows, his laughter echoing ominously. He had not been defeated, only delayed, and Lyria knew, with a chilling certainty, that the true test of her power and her bond with Kale was only beginning. That night, she could not sleep. Her chest still hummed with the energy of the battle, and her thoughts turned constantly to Kale. He had been frightening, commanding, yet protective, and somewhere beneath the shadows of his centuries, she sensed a heart capable of care. She realized, with a mixture of fear and longing, that she did not want to face the coming trials alone, but to trust him fully. Heart, mind, and power was a step she had not yet dared to take, and yet somewhere deep in her soul she knew she would have to. The wind had changed. Where once the cliffs howled with the storms of uncertainty, now they carried a tense silence, a quiet that spoke of waiting. Lyria stood at the highest balcony of the castle, the silver light of dawn glinting across the jagged stones. Her hands, once trembling, now held steady. The pulse in her chest, the faint fire of her power, was alive and strong. Kale emerged from the shadows behind her, his presence as commanding as ever, yet tempered with a softness that had grown over the weeks they had spent together. He did not speak immediately. He only watched her, as though trying to measure the distance between fear and courage, between hesitation and destiny. "You are ready," he said finally, his voice quiet but unwavering. Lyria turned to him, her eyes reflecting the pale morning light. "I think I am," she whispered, though doubt lingered at the edges of her confidence. She could feel the tension in the air. Far off, in the northern forests, their enemy waited. The rival who had stalked her, who had threatened the castle and the bond they shared, was preparing for one final strike. Kale's gaze hardened. "He underestimates you," he said. "Underestimates what we are together, but we will show him the strength of fate and the bond that cannot be broken." For a moment, Lyria felt fear rise, sharp and hot. Then she felt Kale's hand brush against hers. The touch was fleeting, but in it was a promise, protection, trust, and something deeper, unspoken, yet undeniable. She squeezed his hand, a small act of courage that surprised even her. The enemy arrived as the sun reached its zenith, a wave of shadows descending on the cliffs below. Hundreds of figures emerged, not just human, but creatures of the northern wilds, twisted and loyal to the rival. Their leader walked at the forefront, cloaked in white silk, eyes glinting with malice and power. Kale moved to the balcony's edge, his voice carrying across the courtyard.
"You will not touch this girl."
"You will not challenge fate. Leave now, or face what centuries of shadows can do." The rival laughed, but it was hollow, brittle. "Fate?" he mocked.
There is no fate here, KL. Only power.
"And we shall see which of us truly commands it." Lyria felt the pulse within her chest surge, a bright rhythm that spread through her veins and out to her fingertips. Kale's presence, close and steady, reinforced it. She was no longer the weak girl sold into darkness. She was awakening, and with him, she was capable of anything. Together, Kale said softly, stepping closer, "Do you trust me?" "I she replied, her voice steady now, filled with a courage she had not known she possessed. Then the battle began. From the cliffs, creatures lunged, moving with the speed of shadows. Lyria raised her hands instinctively, letting the power within her flow. Light arced from her fingers, striking the attackers with precision, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Each pulse of energy was guided by her own will, and each time Kale's presence reinforced it, a silent heartbeat of power beside hers. Kale moved like darkness incarnate, swift and unstoppable. No enemy dared approach him directly. His power was immense, honed by centuries, yet he never lost focus on Lyria. When a shadow lunged at her, he was there in an instant, deflecting it effortlessly. When a wave of dark energy threatened to overwhelm her, he placed his hand upon her chest, steadying the rhythm of her pulse, linking their strengths. The rival advanced, stepping into the open.
"You think your bond can save you?"
he demanded, voice slicing through the clamor of battle.
"You are nothing without me."
Lyria's hands glowed brighter, the energy in her veins almost blinding. She felt Kale's presence inside her, steady and guiding.
"I am not nothing."
Her voice strong and clear.
"And neither is he. We are stronger
together." A brilliant flash erupted, and the force of their combined power struck the rival with a wave that sent him stumbling backward. The creatures around him froze. Sensing the shift, Lyria felt her strength and her courage rise in tandem, her fears melting into determination. Kale's eyes, dark and infinite, met hers.
"Do not hold back," he commanded. "Now, together." They moved as one.
Two halves of a whole, the light of her power intertwined with the shadows of his, forming a force neither human nor fully supernatural. The rival, powerful though he was, could not withstand it. Each strike, each pulse weakened him until finally he fell to his knees, exhausted, defeated, not by cruelty but by the bond of trust, respect, and shared power that Lyria and Kale had forged. Lyria gasped, the glow fading, leaving her trembling but triumphant. Kale stepped beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, eyes wide with disbelief and awe. "You did it," he said quietly. "You saved yourself and this castle, and more importantly, you claimed your strength." She felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from fear, not from sorrow, but from relief and something more profound. Pride. For the first time in her life, she knew she was not weak. She was strong, and she was capable. And beside her, Kale's hand held hers, steady, grounding her, a reminder that she was not alone. The rival staggered to his feet, glancing at them one last time.
"This is not over," he said, though his voice held defeat now. "Fate is fickle." Kale's gaze hardened.
"Then let him leave. He has seen what strength truly is." With that, the rival retreated into the forest, disappearing into the shadows that had once threatened them. The castle, silent after the battle, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The wind softened, carrying with it the scent of salt from the sea below and the faint warmth of sunlight breaking through the clouds. Lyria stood at the balcony, her hands still glowing faintly from the surge of her power. She felt the castle alive beneath her feet, aware of the victory and aware of the bond that had carried them through the storm. Kale stepped beside her, silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice low and intimate. "You have grown beyond what I expected. You are no longer the girl I first met."
"You are
extraordinary." Lyria looked at him, heart thundering. "And you, Lyria, have changed too," she whispered. "I see it now. The Lord of Shadows can care, can protect, can even love." Kale's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Centuries have taught me patience," he said. "But you awakened something I thought long buried, something I cannot ignore. The words hung between them, delicate yet immense. The bond they shared had been forged in fear and struggle, tempered by trust and danger. Now it had become something deeper, something neither of them could deny. Days passed, and the castle returned to its rhythm. The northern forests remained silent, as though the creatures who had followed the rival had been warned by the force of their bond. Lyria continued to explore her powers, learning to control the pulses that had once frightened her. She trained alongside Kale, and though the exercises were difficult, they became moments of connection, silent gestures, shared glances, and unspoken understanding. Kale had taught her many things: strategy, awareness, the history of the castle, and the secrets of her bloodline. But he had also taught her something far more profound: trust. To trust herself, her instincts, her power, and him. And in return, Lyria had awakened something in him, a vulnerability he had not known he possessed, and a connection that transcended centuries and shadows. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the cliffs, Lyria and Kale stood together atop the highest tower. The sky blazed with gold and violet, the sea reflecting the colors like molten glass. "You have changed everything," Kale said, his voice almost reverent. "Not just the castle, not just your destiny, but mine as well." Lyria reached out, placing a hand on his chest. "And you have changed me," she replied. "I am no longer afraid. I am ready." Kyle's hand covered hers, strong yet gentle. The wind whipped around them, carrying with it the scent of salt and the whispers of the cliffs.
"Then let us face the world together," he said. "As partners, as allies, as fated."
For the first time, Lyria did not feel small or powerless. The castle, the cliffs, the world beyond, they were hers to face, alongside the man who had once terrified her, but now held her heart with care and reverence. And in that moment, as the sun set over the northern cliffs, their bond solidified, not born of fear or ownership, but of respect, courage, and a love tempered by trials and triumph. The kingdom, the shadows, and the whispers of destiny would test them again, of course. But for now, they stood together, unbroken, a fated pair whose strength and love could withstand anything. The night fell, gentle and quiet, carrying with it the promise of peace. And though the prophecy had only begun to unfold, one truth shone brighter than any magic, any danger, any curse. Lyria and Kale were no longer prey and lord. They were equals, bound not by fear, but by the enduring power of the heart.